Tonight we step onto the illuminated stage of 1960s Broadway, where the Empire Theatre's spotlight turns deadly during a performance of Three Strikes Out. As star actor Henry Marshall collapses from poison before a shocked audience, suspicion falls on his director wife, ambitious understudy, rising ingenue, and desperate impresario. Join us for Three Strikes Out, a tale of ambition and betrayal. Before we begin, share in the comments. Where are you joining us from tonight? Your presence illuminates our journey through these shadowed mysteries. If this tale captivates your imagination, consider supporting us through our membership program, which includes access to ad-free versions of all our stories and exclusive content, or leave us a tip. Every contribution helps keep these mysteries alive in the darkness. Now let the show begin. Chapter 1. The Poisoned Spotlight. In the heart of New York City, during the sweltering summer of 1965, the Empire Theatre stood as a beacon of intrigue amid the glittering chaos of Broadway. Its marquee proclaimed Three Strikes Out in vivid scarlet letters, a mystery play that had captivated audiences for 7 months with its clever twists and simmering tensions. The production drew crowds eager to witness Henry Marshall, the renowned actor whose commanding presence and subtle malice made him the undisputed star. Yet on this fateful evening, the line between fiction and reality would blur in the most irreversible manner, leaving 600 spectators unwitting witnesses to a tragedy. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere crackled with the usual pre-performance energy. Henry Marshall, at 52, retained the magnetic allure that had propelled him to fame. Tall and imposing, with steel-gray hair and a voice that resonated like distant thunder. His dressing room was a sanctuary of controlled disorder. Scripts annotated in his precise hand, a decanter of fine whiskey amber bright beneath the mirror bulbs, and photographs from past triumphs lining the walls. He adjusted his cufflinks with deliberate care, his reflection in the mirror revealing a gaze weathered by decades of performance and private disappointments. His wife, Monica Marshall, the theater's astute director, observed him from the threshold. At 45, she exuded an air of refined authority. Her dark hair neatly coiled, and her attire a simple yet elegant ensemble of silk blouse and tailored skirt. Monica had invested her inheritance in the Empire a decade earlier, transforming it into a venue of repute. Their union, once fueled by youthful passion, had evolved into a pragmatic alliance, bound by professional necessities rather than affection. "Everything in order for tonight?" Monica inquired, her tone measured, betraying no hint of the underlying strains. Henry met her gaze in the mirror. "As always. Ensure the whiskey is genuine, no substitutions. The audience expects authenticity." She inclined her head, accustomed to his demands. The play required a pivotal scene involving a tainted beverage, and Henry insisted upon real whiskey to heighten the illusion. "The bottle is prepared along with the ice. Those larger cubes as you prefer for clarity from the rear seats." The call for places echoed through the corridors. Henry straightened, assuming the mantle of his character with effortless grace. "Let us proceed." The curtain ascended to polite applause, unveiling a meticulously crafted set. An opulent Manhattan drawing room, furnished in the modern style of the era, with expansive windows framing a simulated cityscape aglow with artificial lights. Henry reclined in an armchair, embodying the role of a domineering spouse. Cora Fay, his youthful co-star of 24, entered with poise, her crimson gown accentuating her lithe form and golden locks. Discovered by Henry at an acting seminar in 1962, she portrayed his wife with a blend of allure and cunning. Paul Preston, the understudy, lingered off stage, his expression one of quiet vigilance. At 25, he possessed the raw potential of emerging talent. Though constrained by Henry's overshadowing presence, the dialogue commenced with precision. Henry commanded, "Laura, "Serve me a whiskey." Cora, in character, responded with a touch of defiance. "You might serve yourself for once." Nonetheless, she obliged, pouring the liquid amber from the bottle positioned in the sideboard. She added 2 substantial ice cubes, crafted in special molds to ensure their visibility and auditory impact, even to distant viewers, a detail Henry had mandated. Prior to presenting the glass, Cora partook of a small sip, a spontaneous addition they had incorporated, symbolizing the revelation of inner thoughts. "To discern your intentions," she murmured, her eyes meeting his in a moment of intense scrutiny. Henry's laughter was deep and resonant. "A wager I am willing to accept." He accepted the glass, agitating it gently, the cubes producing a distinct rattle, before consuming a generous portion. The exchange intensified, laden with insinuations of betrayal and malice. "You desire my demise," Henry accused. "You would orchestrate my suicide, arranging matters to implicate me in murder." Cora retorted with sharp wit. "You are detestable. Universal affection is reserved for the mediocre." Henry persisted. "Hatred provides strength. Should you attempt my end, poison would be your choice, a method befitting timidity, and women are often timid." Her reply was laced with warning, less so with each passing day. Then came the headache, an unscripted flourish Henry favored for verisimilitude. He pressed his palm to his forehead, wincing. "This infernal pain. Where have I placed those tablets?" From his pocket he retrieved a small container. Cora unscrewed the lid with care, preserving the seal, and extended a pill. He ingested it, washing it down with the remaining whiskey. The scripted gasp ensued, a theatrical stumble. Yet it persisted beyond the cue. Henry's features contorted in authentic torment, his countenance protruding, limbs seizing. He clutched at his neck, emitting strangled sounds. Cora's alarm was genuine. "Henry, what's happening?" The audience stirred, some applauding the apparent brilliance, others sensing anomaly. Henry crumpled to the floor, convulsing. Cora knelt, her cries piercing. "Someone help him." The curtain descended abruptly, muffling the growing unrest. In the wings, confusion reigned. Paul emerged hastily. "What has occurred? Is this part of the performance?" Monica advanced, kneeling to examine her husband. Her fingers sought a pulse, finding only stillness. "He is deceased," she declared calmly, amid the crew's dismay. Paul faltered. "But how?" Monica rose, issuing directives. Paul addressed the audience. "Declare it a health concern. Maintain composure. Advise them to retain their tickets." Paul ventured forth, his voice unsteady. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Marshall has experienced an unexpected ailment. Kindly depart in an orderly fashion. Your tickets shall be valid for a subsequent presentation." As the theater cleared, murmurs rippling through the exodus, Monica regarded the lifeless form. The illumination cast elongated silhouettes, transforming the platform into a scene of enigma. The constabulary's arrival loomed, promising scrutiny. The performance had concluded, yet the true puzzle commenced. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Wings. The following morning broke with a pall of humidity over New York, the sort that clung to one's skin and amplified the city's ceaseless hum. The Empire Theatre, which had pulsed with life the previous evening, now stood subdued, its entrance cordoned by police barriers and the curious gazes of passers-by. Newspaper vendors cried out headlines of the shocking event, their voices mingling with the rumble of taxis and the distant wail of sirens. Within the theatre, an air of hushed expectancy prevailed, as if the building itself awaited the unraveling of its secrets. Inspector Jack Rivera arrived promptly, his arrival unheralded save for the quiet authority of his demeanor. A man of middle years, with a keen intellect concealed behind a facade of unassuming politeness, Rivera had earned his reputation through meticulous observation and an uncanny ability to discern the falsehoods woven into human narratives. He presented his credentials to the constable at the door and proceeded inside, where the stage lay exposed under harsh working lamps, the set appearing curiously forlorn without the illusion of performance. A young forensic officer approached, his notebook in hand. "Inspector, the preliminary findings confirm strychnine as the agent. Residue in the glass, though absent from the bottle itself. The tablet container yields no trace of poison, merely commonplace aspirin. The coroner's report suggests a delayed onset, perhaps facilitated by dissolution in a medium such as the ice." Rivera nodded thoughtfully, his attention turning to the sideboard with its concealed compartment. A subtle mechanism indeed, one that required intimate knowledge of the routine. Ascending to the managerial suite, he found Monica Marshall seated at her desk, engaged in correspondence. She rose with composed grace, extending a hand. "Inspector Rivera, I presume. Please sit down. Can I get you anything?" He accepted a cup of black coffee and regarded her with quiet scrutiny. Monica possessed a poise that spoke of breeding and resolve, her features arranged in an expression of mild concern rather than overt sorrow. "My condolences upon your loss, Mrs. Marshall. However, you appear remarkably collected under the circumstances." She resumed her seat, folding her hands neatly. "Henry and I had long since navigated beyond the realm of sentimental attachment, Inspector. Our marriage, contracted in the flush of youth, had matured into a partnership of mutual convenience. With my father's legacy, I acquired this theater in 1955. Henry contributed his talents upon the stage, while I directed its fortunes. Affection waned. Supplanted by practicalities, he pursued his interests, and I mine." Rivera inclined his head. "Interests such as Miss Cora Fay?" A faint smile touched her lips. "A transient diversion, as were others. Henry encountered her at a dramatic seminar in 1962 and deemed her promising. She assumed the role of his spouse in the play, a part that extended, I gather, beyond the footlights. Cora is ambitious, yet Henry ensured her dependence upon him." "And Mr. Paul Preston?" Rivera inquired. "The understudy, a capable young man, though Henry viewed him with disfavor. Their interactions off-stage were minimal, stemming from some trifling discord during preparations. Paul was my selection. Henry resented the imposition." Rivera set down his cup, his gaze steady. "The toxin strychnine echoes the narrative of your production. An attempted poisoning wherein the victim conducts his own inquiry. A curious parallel." Monica's expression remained serene. Henry was adamant about veracity and performance. He demanded authentic whiskey upon the stage, decrying substitutes as artificial. I conveyed the bottle from this very room, accompanied by the ice and vessel. Our property master being indisposed, I assumed the duty. Cora dispensed the drink. Paul observed from the wings. "You hold sole proprietorship of the theater?" Rivera probed. "Jointly with Henry's investments. My inheritance provided the foundation, but he acquired portions over time. We were collaborators in enterprise, if not in sentiment." Rivera observed the subtle evasion. "The tablet, part of the script. An improvisation of Henry's devising, intended to lend naturalism. He suffered migraines with increasing frequency and would incorporate the affliction spontaneously. Cora assisted by opening the container, mindful of the seal. The inspector continued his methodical pursuit. To administer the fatal dose upon the stage, before an assembly of 600, Such audacity suggests either profound enmity or a desire for spectacle. Or self-inflicted demise, Monica posited evenly. Henry occasionally mused upon departing in the manner of Molière, expiring amid the applause. The play itself toys with such notions. The victim feigns poisoning and pursues the culprit himself, dispensing with superfluous authorities. Theatre inspector often surpasses life in ingenuity. Rivera regarded her closely. You're quite thorough, Inspector. Outward displays of emotion are not my custom. Our bond was one of shared recollections and equities. Henry's conquests were legion, though exaggerated by the press. Jealousy held no sway over me. He ventured further. The ice cubes, unusual in dimension, formed in specialized molds within my private refrigerating unit above. Sufficiently large to be discernible from afar, Henry's stipulation for visual impact. Stored aloft to prevent his premature indulgence, they were delivered fresh. Rivera rose, his manner courteous yet insistent. The analyses shall encompass all elements, vessel, container, residue. Any individuals harboring ill will toward your husband? Henry inspired varied sentiments, yet I suspect none specifically. His nature was such that he courted adversaries, thriving upon conflict. Rivera paused, consulting his notes. I understand there was another casualty last evening. Your dog. Monica's composure faltered slightly. The first genuine emotion she had displayed. Lucky. Yes, he passed during the performance. A venerable creature, 15 years old. He had taken to sleeping in the wings on his customary cushion during shows. I discovered him afterward when the commotion had settled. She touched her temple delicately. In truth, Inspector, I find myself more affected by Lucky's passing than by Henry's. The dog was a faithful companion. Henry had become something else entirely. Rivera made a note. The animal's death. You attributed it to age. What else could it be? Lucky was ancient by canine standards. Though now that I reflect. She hesitated, then continued. He was positioned near where the properties are stored, where the ice vessel is placed after use. Paul mentioned emptying it into the basin from which Lucky was wont to drink. Could there be some connection? Rivera's interest sharpened. The ice, once melted, where precisely was it discarded? Into the metal basin beside the props table. Lucky always sought water there after performances. But surely you don't suggest? I suggest nothing yet, Mrs. Marshall. Merely gathering particulars. Rivera closed his notebook. The animal's remains. They've been preserved for examination. Monica nodded, a shadow of concern crossing her features. In the cold storage below, pending arrangements. Inspector, if Lucky's death was not natural, if someone used him as an unwitting test. Her voice trailed off, the implication hanging between them. Descending the stairs, Rivera pondered the exchange. Monica's responses, while forthright, concealed undercurrents. Her serenity perhaps a shield, her omissions deliberate. The theatre's ownership hinted at motive, should Henry's holdings threaten her dominion. The canine's demise in the wings, attributed to age, now warranted scrutiny. Might it have imbibed from the discarded melt? The delayed toxin aligned with dissolution in ice, a method requiring familiarity and foresight. Proceeding to his vehicle, Rivera ignited a cigarette, the tobacco smoke drifting thoughtfully. The inquiry had commenced in earnest. Shadows lingered in the recesses, awaiting illumination. The subsequent interview with Oliver Neal promised further revelations, as did encounters with Cora Fay and Paul Preston. In this labyrinth of motives and deceptions, truth would emerge methodically, one disclosure at a time. Chapter 3. The Impresario's Gamble. Inspector Jack Rivera departed the Empire Theatre with a mind abuzz with possibilities, much like the intricate plots that had long captivated him in the works of his favored authors. The conversation with Monica Marshall had been illuminating in its restraint. Her demeanor, so impeccably controlled, suggested a woman accustomed to directing not only plays, but also the narratives of her own life. The strychnine, with its delayed efficacy, pointed inexorably toward a method requiring both cunning and familiarity. Dissolution within the ice, a seemingly innocuous element that had escaped initial suspicion. His inquiries led him to O'Malley's Bar, a modest establishment nestled in the less salubrious precincts of 8th Avenue, where the clamor of Broadway gave way to the quieter pursuits of those who dwelt in its shadows. The bar was a haven for the theatrical fraternity's lesser lights, managers, writers, and performers seeking solace in liquid form. Rivera entered, the door's bell announcing his presence with a discreet chime. The interior was dimly illuminated, the air redolent of tobacco and spirits, with a jukebox softly rendering a melancholic melody by Mr. Frank Sinatra. Behind the counter stood Albert, the proprietor, a robust gentleman whose naval tattoos bespoke a life of varied experiences. He greeted Rivera with a nod of recognition. "Inspector, what might I procure for you? A measure of whiskey, perhaps?" "Coffee, if you please," Rivera replied, his attention surveying the patrons. In a secluded booth sat Oliver Neal, the impresario responsible for Henry's engagements. Neal was a man of middle age, his features marked by the toll of perpetual negotiation, thinning hair carefully arranged, spectacles perched upon a nose slightly flushed, and attire that, while once fashionable, now bore the patina of frequent use. Before him lay a periodical devoted to equine pursuits, its pages annotated with fervent notations. Neal glanced up, his expression shifting from absorption to mild alarm. "Inspector Rivera? Do join me. Albert, another libation for myself, and whatever the gentleman requires." Rivera seated himself opposite, accepting the proffered coffee. "Mr. Neal, your association with Henry Marshall was of long standing, I understand." "Indeed," Neal affirmed, his fingers drumming upon the table. "Since his early days in off-Broadway ventures, Henry was my principal client, a star whose luminance sustained my endeavors, though not without its challenges." Rivera inclined his head. "Challenges such as his demands for increased remuneration?" Neal's gaze flickered. "You are well informed. Recently, he sought 15% of his earnings as my fee, deeming my services indispensable yet burdensome. Our last discussion on the matter was heated." He paused as if recollecting the scene. "It transpired here, but a week ago. Henry arrived in a state of agitation, having concluded a matinee performance." Rivera encouraged the narrative. "Tell me what happened." Neal leaned forward, his voice adopting a mimicry of Henry's timbre. "He entered with purpose, demanding whiskey forthwith. Neal, relieve me of these trivial concerns. The box office tallies, the attendances. I have had my fill." I responded, "Gladly. But your demands consume my time. I have other protégés to nurture." He retorted sharply, "Who sustains you? They or I?" Then he expatiated upon the younger generation. "They receive all opportunities, stardom without merit. It is absurd, revolting, and they resent our prowess. If Paul's gaze were lethal, I would have perished long since." I pressed for the increased percentage. He demurred, accusing me of extortion. Rivera noted the particulars, discerning in them a portrait of Henry's imperious nature. He consumed spirits copiously. "Excessively so," Neal conceded. It seemed an attempt to numb some inner discontent, despite his successes. Humility was foreign to him. Rather, a form of arrogance drove him to perpetual striving. "And his relations with Miss Fay?" Rivera inquired. Neil adjusted his spectacles. Cora admired him, though her affection was tinged with self-interest. Henry advanced her career modestly, yet restrained her from broader horizons, fearing desertion. Resentment may have festered, but scarcely to the point of homicide. Rivera shifted to another subject. Mr. Preston? The understudy, competent, though Henry regarded him with disdain. Monica advocated for his inclusion. Henry chafed at the directive. Their off-stage discourse was non-existent. The inspector pursued the domestic sphere. Mrs. Marshall and her husband, harmonious. Neil hesitated, publicly acknowledged as strained. Affection had dissipated. Sporadic quarrels erupted, intensified by Henry's inebriation. However, no sustained animosity existed. Monica mourned her canine companion's passing last evening more keenly than Henry's. A venerable creature named Lucky, which reposed in the wings during performances. Rivera's interest quickened. The dog's demise, natural. Presumably age, Neil replied. It expired during the representation upon its customary cushion. Your presence backstage yesterday? Neil's composure wavered. I visited briefly, to assess the audience. Departed ere the critical scene. The bar affords no robust alibi. Patrons come and go unobserved. Rivera delved into finances. Henry's insistence upon 15%, indicative of desperation on your part. Neil's fingers tightened upon his glass. Merely commerce. Henry constituted my present revenue, my younger clients, the future. Nevertheless, he dominated my attentions. A periodical upon the table caught Rivera's eye, a racing journal. You indulge in wagers upon the turf. Neil folded it hastily. A diversion. Today's contest is formidable. My selection holds scant promise. Rivera noted the racing periodical but chose not to pursue the matter further. Mrs. Marshall's demeanor since the incident. How would you characterize it? Neil adjusted his spectacles. Remarkably composed, though that is Monica's nature. She grieves privately, if at all. Her concern lies more with the theatre's future than with Henry's past. Rivera rose, expressing gratitude. Neil's disclosures, while forthcoming, bore the stamp of selective truth. His unease, the concealed periodical, the familiarity with domestic discord. The impresario's deceptions hinted at deeper involvement. Proceeding to his conveyance, Rivera contemplated the emerging pattern. The subsequent interview with Miss Fay promised additional clarity, as did that with Mr. Preston. In this web of ambitions and resentments, the truth awaited patient disentanglement. Chapter 4. The Ingenue's Mask. Inspector Jack Rivera departed O'Malley's bar with a sense of measured satisfaction, the impresario's revelations lingering in his thoughts like the subtle clues in a well-constructed puzzle. Oliver Neil had presented himself as a man burdened by circumstance, though his narrative contained those small inconsistencies which, in Rivera's experience, often betrayed deeper deceptions. The afternoon sun cast elongated shadows across the pavements as Rivera directed his vehicle toward Greenwich Village, that enclave of artistic fervor where aspiration mingled with penury. Cora Fay resided in a modest brownstone, its facade bearing the patina of age and neglect, much like the dreams of many who sought fame upon the stage. Rivera ascended the creaking stairs, noting the faint aromas of various cuisines wafting from adjacent doors, evidence of a community sustained on meager means and shared ambitions. Cora answered his knock promptly, her appearance that of one who had endured a restless night. At 24, she possessed a beauty both delicate and arresting. Wide eyes of emerald hue, framed by lashes that lent an air of vulnerability, and tresses of gold that cascaded in artful disarray. Clad in a simple robe of silk, She gestured him inside with a grace spawn of theatrical training. The apartment was a testament to youthful endeavor. Walls adorned with portraits of celebrated performers, a typewriter surrounded by discarded pages, and a vase holding faded blooms from some bygone triumph. "Inspector Rivera," she said, her voice soft yet steady. "I anticipated your visit. Please take a seat. Would you care for tea, or perhaps coffee? I find such rituals soothing in times of distress." Rivera declined politely, settling upon a chair that afforded a view of the room's modest confines. "Miss Fay, the events of last evening must have been most disconcerting. If you would recount them from your perspective." She lit a cigarette with deliberate motions, inhaling deeply before responding. It was as any other performance, at first. Henry commanded the whiskey. I poured it, adding the ice as customary. Those large cubes, you know, for visibility. Then our little custom. I sipped first, to discern his thoughts, as Henry phrased it. A touch we added for effect. The audience delighted in the intimacy it suggested. Rivera nodded encouragingly. And no immediate ill effect. None whatsoever. We proceeded with the dialogue, the accusations, the veiled threats. Henry then feigned his migraine, an unscripted flourish he favored for verisimilitude. He produced the tablet container. I opened it, mindful of the seal, and proffered a pill. He consumed it with the remaining liquor. The choke commenced as per the text, but it persisted. His countenance altered dreadfully. He collapsed, in earnest. I believed it part of the act until his stillness became apparent. Her recital was precise, delivered with the clarity of one accustomed to memorization. Rivera pursued the personal. Your association with Mr. Marshall extended beyond the professional realm. Cora's cheeks tinged with color, though she met his gaze forthrightly. Indeed, it began at a dramatic seminar in 1962. He was the instructor, I a novice. He mentored me, secured auditions, this very role. Our connection deepened, though lately it grew confining. Henry was possessive. He discouraged independent pursuits, insisting I required further guidance. In truth, he feared my departure. Rivera discerned the undercurrent of resentment. Such restraint might engender bitterness. Undoubtedly, she conceded. Though to resort to extremity, no, Inspector. Henry represented opportunity, however flawed. Still, there were photographs from my early days, artistic studies, somewhat indiscreet, taken when funds were scarce. Henry possessed copies. In moments of inebriation, he alluded to their potential dissemination should I stray. Not an overt threat, but sufficient to instill caution. Rivera made a mental note of this leverage, a motive concealed in shame. These images remain in existence. Likely in his safe, either here or at residence. I'd appreciate your discretion. That chapter is closed and revelation now would impede my progress. He assured her of confidentiality, then inquired, Your rapport with Mr. Preston? An amicable acquaintance, she replied smoothly. We met through the production. He is a reliable colleague. We occasionally converse on the exigencies of our vocation. The response rang false. Records indicated prior acquaintance from 1962. Rivera elected to withhold this for the moment. And between Mr. Marshall and Mr. Preston. Strained, to say the least. Henry viewed Paul with condescension, treating him as mere adjunct. Off-stage communication was scant, a consequence of some rehearsal slight that rankled Paul's sensitivity. Actors are prone to such wounds. Rivera shifted to the environs. During the performance, did you observe aught unusual backstage? Monica attended to the properties, Paul positioned in the wings. I glimpsed Mr. Neal briefly, though the shadows may have deceived. Rivera rose. One final matter. Did you cast glances toward the wings amid the scene? Occasionally, she affirmed. Nothing amiss, merely the customary figures. Expressing gratitude, Rivera descended to the street, where the village throbbed with vitality, a musician strumming upon a doorstep, vendors proffering wares. Cora's testimony, while articulate, harbored evasions, the concealed familiarity with Paul, the photographs as potential instrument of coercion. Her ambition, veiled in vulnerability, suggested depths capable of desperate measures. The discrepancy regarding Neal further implicated the impresario. Proceeding to his vehicle, Rivera contemplated the accumulating evidence. The subsequent discourse with Mr. Preston promised additional insights. In this intricate tapestry of motives, each thread demanded careful examination lest the pattern dissolve into obscurity. Chapter 5. The Understudy's Ambition. Inspector Jack Rivera, having concluded his interview with Miss Cora Fay, found himself contemplating the subtle discrepancies that had emerged in her testimony. The young actress's account, delivered with such apparent candor, nonetheless harbored those small evasions which in his long experience often signaled a more intricate web of connections. Her description of Paul Preston as merely an amicable acquaintance seemed oddly formal for colleagues working so closely together in such an intimate production. There was a rehearsed quality to her responses about him, as if she were carefully avoiding any deeper discussion of their relationship. Moreover, her mention of glimpsing Mr. Neal backstage aligned with emerging patterns, casting further doubt upon the impresario's assertions. His initial intention had been to proceed directly to Mr. Preston's residence in the upper reaches of the city, a modest apartment in a district known for its transient population of aspiring artists. However, a recollection from his earlier visit to O'Malley's bar prompted a diversion. The proprietor, Albert, had casually remarked upon Preston's habit of frequenting the establishment in the afternoons, there to ponder his scripts over a modest refreshment. Such an environment, Rivera reasoned, might yield a more unguarded conversation than a formal call at home, where the subject could prepare his defenses. Accordingly, he directed his vehicle toward the familiar avenue, arriving as the sun began its descent, casting a warm yet deceptive glow upon the urban landscape. O'Malley's welcomed him once more with its subdued ambience, the murmur of conversations, the faint strains of a phonograph rendering a popular melody, and the pervasive aroma of spirits and tobacco. Albert, ever the observant host, acknowledged him with a nod. Inspector returned so soon, coffee as before. Indeed, Rivera replied, his gaze scanning the premises. And perchance Mr. Paul Preston is present? Albert indicated the far end of the counter. There, with his notebook, a pint of ale, and his thoughts for company. Paul Preston was a young man of striking appearance, 25 years of age, with dark hair neatly arranged and features that suggested the potential for leading roles, were fortune to smile upon him. He sat absorbed in his writings, his pen moving with purposeful strokes across the page. Rivera approached with measured steps, producing his identification. Mr. Preston, Inspector Jack Rivera of the police. Could I ask you a few questions? Preston looked up, his expression one of mild astonishment, swiftly composed into politeness. A transition indicative of theatrical training. Certainly, Inspector. Regarding poor Henry, I suppose. Do sit. Can I get you anything? Rivera accepted a stool and his customary coffee. He observed Preston closely. The young man's hands, though steady, betrayed a slight tremor, and his gaze held a depth of calculation. You were positioned off-stage last evening, affording you a view of the unfortunate occurrence. Preston nodded, setting aside his notebook. In the wings, courtside as we term it, awaiting my entrance. The scene was progressing normally at first. Henry and Cora delivered their lines as rehearsed. The usual back-and-forth dialogue about betrayal and suspicion. Everything appeared routine, until Henry began his improvised migraine routine. He retrieved the tablet container. She opened it with care. He ingested the pill with the remaining liquor. The scripted choking sequence commenced, yet it intensified beyond what we'd rehearsed. His collapse was genuine. I realized something was terribly wrong and hastened forward, ascertaining no pulse. Monica directed me to inform the audience. A medical indisposition, tickets to be honored subsequently. Rivera sipped his coffee, allowing a pause. Your relations with Mr. Marshall? Cordial? Preston's response carried a note of acerbity. Scarcely. As his understudy, I mastered every nuance of his role, yet offstage he regarded me with indifference, bordering upon contempt. An early rehearsal discord some perceived slight engendered lasting estrangement. We conversed only as the text demanded. The inspector detected the undercurrent of resentment. Such treatment might provoke animosity. Admittedly, Preston conceded, the theatrical world is unforgiving, opportunities are scarce, and Henry monopolized the limelight. I harbored envy, who would not? A principal role while I languished in obscurity. Yet to escalate to violence? I am an actor, Inspector, not an assassin. Rivera observed the fervor, then inquired, Your acquaintance with Miss Fay? A colleague of recent vintage. Preston replied smoothly. We met through the production. She is a dependable partner. We occasionally discuss the challenges of our profession. Did you observe any anomalies off stage? Monica attended to the final arrangements, the bottle, ice, glass, delivered with scant moments to spare. I feared oversight. Mr. Neal made a fleeting appearance some 30 minutes prior, departing without venturing to the opposite wing. Neal's presence corroborated anew. Rivera pursued the mechanics. The sideboard, its construction. A clever device with an open rear. Monica positions the items from the wings, garden side, and Cora retrieves them on stage, unseen by the spectators. Following the incident, Rivera continued. I assisted in conveying Henry to his dressing room. Cora was distraught. Monica retained her poise, though I believe it was Cora who summoned the authorities. I then tidied the properties, the bottle void consigned to refuse, the ice vessel emptied into a basin upon the floor from which the dog Lucky was wont to drink. I rinsed it thereafter. Rivera's interest sharpened. The canine's basin, repository of the melt. Monica has advanced your career. She has been gracious, Preston admitted, a faint color rising. Advocated for my inclusion despite Henry's objections. She perceives in me echoes of his younger self, eager, gifted. My gratitude is profound yet untainted by impropriety. Rivera altered course. Were you privy to discord between Mr. and Mrs. Marshall? Preston's eyes widened slightly. Not in detail, though altercations occurred. I inadvertently overheard one last week, post-matinee, in the green room. Tell me what happened, Rivera urged. Preston leaned nearer, his voice adopting a confidential tone. Henry confronted her with intensity, somewhat inebriated. Monica, your indiscretions are permissible under our understanding, yet exercise discretion, and not with that individual. She countered, your own adventures lack subtlety. He persisted, mine differ. But he is mercenary after your purse. He termed him that thoroughbred, costly beyond measure. Monica defended, he possesses virtues you lack. Henry mocked, such as indebtedness. You sold 15 shares to Chalvin to alleviate his burdens, but I have repurchased them at double the value. The theater is now mine, majority held. Monica, incensed, denounced Chalvin as treacherous for the betrayal. Henry concluded, human frailty. Sever ties with the fellow or accept subordination. She pledged opposition. Rivera transcribed diligently. The exchange illuminated Henry's dominance, Monica's vulnerability. Motive abounded. He tested gently. This thoroughbred, might it describe yourself? Youthful, favored by Monica. Preston recoiled. Absurdity. Would I divulge this to incriminate myself? My focus is the art, not intrigue. The denial lacked conviction. Rivera rose. With Henry's removal you ascend. Principal in the tour, a significant advancement. Preston's features tightened. Undeniably, yet not at such a price. Last evening's announcement was reflexive. Preserve the tickets, I said, amid the turmoil. Rivera departed, the establishment's door closing upon a rendition of Suspicious Minds. Preston's envy was palpable. His deliberate downplaying of his connection with Cora intimated collusion. The quarrel deepened Monica's incentive. The theater's control at stake. The ice theory solidified. Gradual thaw, canine casualty. The horse reference, equine, aligning with Neil's pursuits, or Preston himself. Returning to Monica for elucidation seemed imperative. The understudy harbored aspirations that might prove perilous. The puzzle neared completion, one revelation at a time. Chapter 6: Fractured Alliances. Inspector Jack Rivera drove back to the Empire Theater through the busy streets of Midtown Manhattan, his thoughts consumed by the interview with Paul Preston. The young actor's testimony had revealed crucial information: the overheard argument between Henry and Monica about theater ownership, and Preston's obvious resentment toward his domineering leading man. The pieces were falling into place. The ice container emptied into the dog's water bowl clinched it for Rivera. The strychnine had been frozen into the ice cubes, slowly dissolving as they melted in Henry's whiskey. Miss Fay's small sip at the beginning of the scene caused no harm because the poison hadn't dissolved yet. By the time Henry drank deeply, the toxin had infused the liquid completely. He turned off the car radio, which was broadcasting news about Vietnam War protests in Washington Square. Politics could wait. Rivera arrived at the Empire Theater to find it dark and shuttered. A hastily posted sign reading, "Closed until further notice." A police officer let him in, and he climbed the stairs to Monica's office, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. Monica was at her desk on the phone, a ledger open before her. Cancel all advertising, yes, the newspapers too. Who's running things here, you or me? She hung up and forced a smile. Inspector, back so soon. I hope you have news. Rivera closed the door behind him and leaned against it. Plenty. But questions lead to more questions, Mrs. Marshall. Let's start with the lies. She raised an eyebrow and gestured to a chair. Lies? That's a serious accusation. Coffee? Or perhaps something stronger? Henry's whiskey is still here. He ignored the offer, remaining standing to maintain control. You said you weren't worried about the theater, but Henry bought those 15 shares from Chalvin at double their value, making him the majority owner. You'd be working for him, not with him. That's motive for murder. Monica's face went pale, but she recovered quickly, lighting a cigarette. You're quite thorough, Inspector. Yes, I didn't mention it. Wouldn't you keep quiet if it made you look guilty? But innocent people hide things too. Henry was gloating about it. But I was planning to fight him in court. No need for poison. Rivera walked across the room. The argument Preston overheard. Henry accused you of financing a horse with theater money. Who is he? Your lover? Or someone else? She exhaled smoke, using it to shield her expression. Henry's imagination. The horse was a bad investment. Expensive, yes, but not worth killing over. A knock interrupted them. Oliver Neal stuck his head in, carrying a briefcase. Monica? Too early for our meeting about Henry's contracts. Inspector, I wasn't expecting you. Rivera gestured him in. Perfect timing. Join us. We're discussing poison methods. Neil hesitated, then entered and sat down with forced casualness. Monica poured him a whiskey, the ice cubes clinking ominously in the glass. Rivera watched their interaction, a shared glance that seemed too familiar for mere business partners. The lab's preliminary report, Rivera said, picking up Monica's phone to call his precinct. The strychnine was in the glass, not the bottle. The pill bottle was clean, just regular aspirin. Cora tasted first with no effect. Henry drank after her and died minutes later. Monica nodded. Suicide? He talked about going out dramatically. Neil stirred his drink. Like Molière, dying on stage. That would be Henry's style. Rivera held up a hand as his call connected. Chabrier? Rivera here. I need those results. Today's horse race results, ownership records, and the pill bottle analysis. He listened, taking notes. That thoroughbred, owned by Neil. And the bottle. No poison but fingerprints. Monica's and Cora's. He hung up and turned to them. Suicide? Unlikely. The poison dissolved slowly in the ice, melting into the whiskey after Cora's taste. Monica gasped. The ice, but I made those cubes myself. In special molds just for the show, Rivera confirmed. Large enough to be seen from the back rows, stored in your freezer upstairs. Neil, your horse that thoroughbred. Monica sold shares to Chalvin to cover your gambling debts. Henry found out and bought them back at double the price. Control of the theater, motive for both of you. Neil's hand shook, spilling whiskey. Coincidence. I gamble, everyone knows that. Rivera pressed Monica. Your theatrical shares sold to cover gambling debts, that's not just helping a friend. And your cold demeanor, an act to hide your feelings. She stubbed out her cigarette. Omissions, not lies. I want the killer caught. I'll help however I can. Neil interjected. Poison in a backup glass? If Cora accidentally broke the first one, there's always a spare in the sideboard. But Rivera shook his head. Cora didn't switch anything. The poison was in the ice cubes. The dog drank the melted water and died the same way. Tension filled the room. Rivera studied both of them, sensing the pressure building. He remembered Neil's voice from the bar, desperate about money. Monica's composure was cracking now, her eyes darting to Neil. Are you protecting him? Rivera asked quietly. Monica stood up. Enough games. If Henry didn't kill himself, then who did? The person who made the ice cubes. Someone with access to Monica's preparations. He turned to Neil. You? The facade crumbled. The truth hung in the air like a death sentence. The moment of revelation had arrived, but first, Rivera needed the full confession. He waited as shadows lengthened across the office floor. Chapter 7. The Melting Truth. In the confines of Monica Marshall's office at the Empire Theatre, Inspector Jack Rivera stood with the quiet assurance of a man who had pieced together the final elements of a particularly intricate jigsaw. The room, bathed in the fading light of the afternoon sun, filtering through half-drawn blinds, exuded an atmosphere of subdued elegance. Polished wood surfaces, stacks of neatly ordered scripts, and the faint aroma of Monica's preferred brand of cigarettes lingering in the air. Yet beneath this veneer of order lay the undercurrent of revelation, as the alliances that had once seemed so steadfast now revealed their fragility. Monica had risen from her desk, her usual poise momentarily disrupted, her hands clasped tightly before her, while Oliver Neal remained seated, his fingers tracing the rim of his whiskey glass with a rhythmic precision that betrayed inner turmoil. The ice within rattled against glass, a sound that, in retrospect, carried an almost prophetic resonance. "The method is clear now," Rivera said, his tone measured and devoid of triumph. "But the question remains, who had the opportunity to poison the ice molds?" Neil placed his glass upon the table with a distinct clatter, the remaining ice shifting as if in quiet protest. "This is preposterous reasoning, Inspector. What grounds have you for directing such an accusation toward me? Your account of absence from the wings has been contradicted," Rivera observed calmly. "Both Miss Fay and Mr. Preston attest to your presence. More importantly, you had access to the preparations the night before." Monica turned toward Neil, her voice a hushed blend of disbelief and dawning comprehension. "Oliver, you were here the night before. You arrived under pretext of discussing the touring arrangements and insisted upon aiding with the props, filling the ice molds no less. Allow me, you said, while I attended to a telephonic matter with the advertising firm." Neil's features contorted, the veneer of assurance crumbling as perspiration gathered upon his brow. "Monica, it was not as you imagine." Rivera advanced his case, his presence commanding the space. "It was precisely as imagined. That thoroughbred, your horse, Neil. The venture in today's contest, the improbable contender you lamented at the bar. Monica financed it, disposing of 15 shares to Chalvin to encompass your wagering obligations. Henry, with his acute perception, uncovered the transaction, repurchasing at double the sum. Thereby assuming majority dominion, he would have ousted you, diminished Monica to mere administrator. You eliminated him to safeguard her and your own interests." Monica's hand ascended to her throat, her equilibrium faltering as she resumed her seat, her palms concealing her countenance. "Oliver, deny it. Tell me it is falsehood." Neil's frame sagged, the resistance ebbing from him like breath from a deflating bellows. He regarded his glass, the ice therein partially liquefied, forming a pool at the base, a poignant emblem. It commenced modestly. Liabilities accumulated, cards, the racetrack. That thoroughbred was to be my salvation, a certain victor. Yet, he faltered repeatedly. Monica extended succor magnanimously, advancing funds, vending those shares discreetly. Henry, that shrewd observer, detected it. He exulted in the repurchase. "The theater belongs to me now. Abandon the spendthrift, or you are both expelled." He lifted his gaze, beseeching Monica. "I acted for our mutual benefit, for yours. Henry threatened devastation. The Empire, our connection. I introduced the strychnine ampules into the mold water the prior eve, whilst you were preoccupied. The timing was perfect. The poison would remain dormant in the ice until it slowly dissolved in his drink during the performance." Monica's eyes brimmed with moisture for the initial occasion, her tone fracturing. "Oliver, how could you? I held affection for you. Yet this? You dispatched him. For my sake." Neil extended a hand toward hers, though she withdrew. "Solely for you. For us. With Henry removed, the equities revert. You are secure. The Empire endures as yours." Rivera advanced, extracting manacles from his belt, the metal gleaming in the waning illumination. "The chapter concludes, Neil. You stand charged with the murder of Henry Marshall." Neil's eyes darted toward the portal, a momentary alarm traversing his features as if contemplating precipitate flight. Yet the resolve deserted him. He subsided in the chair, his cranium in his palms, his frame quivered. "I never intended this denouement. It was to be pristine, dramatic, as Henry might have conceived. But you are correct. Heaven help me, what have I wrought?" Monica averted her visage, her spine to him, murmuring, "You imbecile. You have demolished us both." Rivera recited the formal cautions, the phrases routine as he affixed the restraints. Neil offered no opposition, his avowal suspended in the ether like a concluding soliloquy. As attendants materialized to convey him, Rivera observed the unfolding, the impresario's descent, not with theatrical pomp, but a subdued, fractured capitulation. The canine had been incidental, the toxin's leisurely thaw a merciless irony. Equity administered, though the theater's wounds would persist. Externally, the sirens receded into the urban din, the Empire's marquee obscure and reproachful. Rivera ignited a cigarette, expelling the smoke into the twilight. The liquefying verity had ascended, bonds sundered, yet the toll resonated like ovation in a vacant auditorium. Chapter 8, Final Curtain. The precinct house on that sultry New York evening hummed with the familiar rhythm of justice in motion, typewriters clacking out reports, phones ringing with new cases, and harsh overhead lights that cast no shadows over the tired faces below. Inspector Jack Rivera leaned against his desk, holding a cup of the station's terrible coffee, black, bitter and barely drinkable, his eyes fixed on the interrogation room where Oliver Neal sat in handcuffs, waiting for his fate. The arrest had been quiet and unremarkable. No dramatic chase through dark alleys, no last-minute twists, just a broken man confessing under the weight of evidence and guilt. Neal had given up completely, explaining his actions like a rehearsed speech, protecting Monica, getting revenge on Henry, desperately trying to save their shared dreams from destruction by debt and Henry's tyranny. Rivera took a cautious sip and winced at the coffee's bitterness, his mind returning to the confrontation in Monica's office. Neal's betrayal had cut deep. Monica's tears had been for her secret lover, not the husband she had endured with quiet resignation. "How could you drag me into this?" she had whispered as the officers led Neal away, her voice mixing sorrow and accusation. Neal had only looked back once, his eyes empty. "For us, Monica. Always for us." The Empire Theatre, that magnificent temple of drama and dreams, would forever bear the stain of scandal. Sensational headlines already appearing in the evening papers. Broadway manager poisons leading actor in icy murder plot. He set down the cup and rubbed his temples, feeling a dull headache that reminded him of Henry's fake illness in his final performance. The case was closed, but loose ends remained like unfinished storylines. Miss Fay's compromising photographs. Rivera had arranged for their quiet return from Henry's safe. They would be given back discreetly, protecting her growing career from scandal. The evasiveness between her and Preston about their relationship. Probably just innocent deception. Colleagues hiding some personal connection or professional rivalry from prying investigators, nothing to do with the murder. Preston's ambitions would now carry him forward, taking over Henry's role in the upcoming tour, a bittersweet promotion born from tragedy. And Monica. She would regain full control of the theatre, the Empire hers to rebuild, though at the cost of her heart. Rivera walked to the window, looking out at the city where lights twinkled like stage footlights against the growing darkness. Broadway pulsed with life below, neon signs blazing, crowds heading to evening shows, unaware of the real drama that had played out in their midst. In this year of 1965, the theatre world reflected the broader times. Glamour hiding turmoil, ambition clashing with morality, trust crumbling under pressure like ice melting in whiskey. Henry Marshall had died pursuing authenticity, only to become victim to its cruel reality. Neal's plan, clever and theatrical, had fallen apart because of overlooked details, a dog's innocent drink, a detective's relentless deduction. A young officer approached carrying a file. "Inspector?" "Neal's hired a lawyer. Wants to make a deal, full confession for a lighter sentence. Says it was passion, not premeditation." Rivera nodded wearily. "Let him talk. Passion makes a thin excuse for murder." As the officer walked away, Rivera thought about the cast of characters. Henry, the tyrant whose arrogance had caused his downfall. Monica, the director caught in the crossfire. Faye and Preston, the rising stars damaged but surviving. Neil, the gambler who had bet everything and lost. Justice wasn't always a neat ending. Sometimes it left observers unsettled, wondering about what might have been. He grabbed his overcoat and headed for the exit. Home called. A quiet apartment, a simple dinner, maybe a late-night movie with Humphrey Bogart. But tomorrow would bring another mystery, another puzzle to solve. The final curtain had fallen on 3 Strikes Out, but in the city that never slept, the show always went on. As the final curtain falls on the Empire Theatre, Inspector Jack Rivera's relentless pursuit unveils a chilling truth. Oliver Neal, driven by desperate love and financial ruin, poisoned the ice cubes to eliminate his rival and secure his future. 3 Strikes Out concludes with justice served,